great female protagonists. What's the secret, Meg?
What's the secret? Um, well, the secret seems so simple and obvious, but it's for some reason harder to do, which is make her a full character, a full and complete character. And I think that often unconsciously, without intention, we don't do that. Um, so oftentimes to catch myself, I will ask, okay, if this was a male character right now, what would he do? Just to catch if I'm unconsciously diminishing her or giving her less to do or not allowing her the full spectrum of character choice that she should have in that moment or character realization. I would say often for female characters, the one of the main problems that they run into is they aren't creating the movie. So, assuming they're the main character of any movie should be creating the movie by the choices they make. Every choice they make creates a response or reaction in the plot, and therefore the story evolves. And way too often, the female character is actually responding and reacting to all the choices that are being made around her, usually by the men. So that to me then is not a main character. She's a faux main character. She may look like she's the main character, but in fact she's not. This happens especially a lot in third acts. If you really look, she has to do the action of the third act. If she's the main character, what did she learn? What can she do at the end that she couldn't have done at the beginning? So again, it's about, for me, the baseline, the kind of baseline question to start asking yourself as a creator is she active? Is she the one who is actively making choices, having behaviors, creating the plot of the movie, and arcing? If she's a character that arcs, to which again is it's basic things you need to think about any character. But for women, sometimes a very strange thing with male and female writers happens where they really become the audience for the male character, or they're there to reflect who the main character is. That happens mostly with supporting female characters. They're in the movie, like, for example, he's a rough and gruff guy, but she loves him. So he must, there must be something good about him because she loves him, right? So, she's being used as a prop to show who he is, or she's the prize. And that's okay because supporting characters are there to illuminate the main character, but great supporting characters still have their own full character. They're not just a single note. So it's really trying to make sure that female characters have the breadth of all of those shades of their character. And it would seem an obvious thing to say that they don't let women be flawed, which is true. I still think the final taboo is female characters who are mothers who aren't perfect. I think that's a final frontier for us. But I think that really allowing her to have a flaw that's active and that feels real, and not just archetypical, is important. But equally important, which I think people think about that, what's her flaw, but I think they don't think as much about what's her strength, meaning what is she really, really good at? What's her skill? Why do I love her? Why do I just meet her and fall madly in love with her as a person? Because she's so good at that. It could be a skill like you would think, I don't know, tennis, but it can also be a skill of behavior, how she handles people, how she handles a situation that the rest of us would crumble. She doesn't. It could be anything, but what is she really, really skilled at, and what is she really bad at? She needs that full breadth of experience as a character, so that we can attach to her as the main character and somebody we want to follow. And I think the other thing I would say is a real dangerous or trap that you can fall into, again, male or female writers, is that there's a habit of letting a female character's power be her victimization. That isn't to say that women aren't victims and they don't need a chance to express what has happened to them. But the second step of that, in order to be a a character for a 3-act movie, in my opinion, is what is her other power base? Because that's what will engage us with her. What is her response to her victimization? Or what is her response to everybody pushing her aside? That's why we love her. I mean, I think of the opening of Erin Brockovich. We love her because she is not going to let that be her power base. Then the extreme of that, if I think about it, is I've read this, and there's a topic going on that I think is true. You also don't want her to be only strong, right? Well, she's a strong male character because she's only strong. Then you're still doing a one note. So I guess that's my note. That's my kind of core idea, is that she can't just be strong. She can't just be good. She can't just be flawed. Like, she needs to have all of the dynamics of a character together. So I guess the other thing I would say is Gina Davis came to Pixar and met with all the writers while I was working there, and she has a organization about representing women. And I asked her a question, which was, there was a sub character in the movie, a director down in Dream Production, who at the time was not going to be a very positive character. And there was a question of making her a woman. And I said, yeah, but then are we saying that female directors are crappy? Like, I got kind of caught in this swirl. And she said, it doesn't, the most important thing is that we see her on the screen, that a woman can be not good at something. How about that as an idea? A woman can be, have negative traits. That alone feels kind of revolutionary. And I thought that was really an awesome thing to think about. To, again, let her have the full spectrum and breadth of her character.
So many great things there for us to talk about, and there's a few things I want to get you to elaborate on. How about we start with this reluctance about letting a female character be flawed? Can you tell us, give us an example of where you think that reluctance comes from, how often you see it, what's underlying it, and the consequences if you have this? So I think it's very flattening if they can't have a flaw. But if you could talk about that as a problem, and then how to deal with it in a development situation, in a room with producers and developers, and often the marketplace, when they're giving you that feedback, they have this really narrow tolerance, this big fear of unlikability in a female protagonist.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think anybody would intellectually say they don't want a female to have a flaw. It's just when it comes up, suddenly there's a pullback. Sometimes, not always. I don't know why, but there is an emotional response to women having any kind of dark side, or not being perfect, and I think it might have to do with the tradition of women in the caregiver role. There's something that makes people get uncomfortable because, if a woman can do that, that means she won't care for me. She's suddenly not in a supportive role. It's not about caring for you. And that, of course, if you think about it in terms of reality, that doesn't make any sense, because all of us as mothers are totally flawed. But there is, in terms of the archetype, something that, she can be flawed if she goes all the way, right, to the dark side, and she's like the witch. But to try to give that delineation of character from flaw to strength. And I think that the likability question you'll get for any character, I need to like them. It's a little harder for women. I know there's certain things that, a woman just can't do. And target to hit. For me, I think there was the way to approach that, if I'm dealing with it in terms of getting notes, is always just to go back to the character in terms of where is that piece of her that is being considered unlikable coming from, in terms of her psychology, her complete deep psychology, what's motivating it. So for example, on Inside Out, Joy as a character can be very unlikable because she's just happy all the time. That's unlikable. And her flaw can very quickly feel selfish. No, everybody needs to be happy. That can feel very kind of self-involved and unlikable. But when that motivation and what is selfishness is actually being motivated by, I'm trying to protect my kid, or I care about all of you, and don't you want to be happy? So in other words, it's still a flaw, but I can understand psychologically why she's behaving the way she's behaving. And you need to do that with any character, and with a female character as well. So if I get the note about likability, I take it, I think about it, and I really look at, okay, psychologically, why is this behavior or flaw that she has really important to the part for me in terms of who she is and what she's going to travel, and where's it coming from? And do they just not understand, and they aren't deeply enough in her point of view, in her emotional context? So they're standing outside of her, judging her. I haven't actually won them over to her view of the world yet. And so that we have empathy for the flaw, at least, unless you're going full out, dark humor, and we're supposed to be kind of watching her. So I always try to go back to the full psychology, and how can we help people understand where that unlikability or that flaw is coming from, that it's a mask for a fear. When I worked with Jodie Foster, she often talked about a character's shame and fear being what's creating a lot of the psychological behavior on top of it. So yes, she may have a flaw, but what's creating it? She's doing that to keep everybody away because she's afraid. And suddenly if you have just a window into that likability, even just for a moment, you don't have to do it for the whole first act. It can just be a moment, then the whole, you can connect to her in a deeper way, which you want to do with any character, of course.
I had a distributor here whose business is a lot to do with, quality art house films, which are more female skewed as a market. And he has a large female staff. And he said that his female staff are so critical of the female protagonists in the movies, much more than he really, and particularly if she does anything bad about being a mother, they just go berserk. I don't know if you have any comments about that.
Yeah, no, it's a final frontier to have a mother who's not perfect or does something bad, or, it just makes people incredibly uncomfortable. I wrote years ago an independent film with another writer, John Morgan, and it was based on a true story in which a mother made a mistake, but it didn't matter that it really happened. It's just too much for people. Yeah, I don't know what that is, but it's real. It's very real.
But can you talk about why it's important to hang on and have a flaw? Like what is the result if you have a character who's perfect in the beginning of the film?
Well, because even if you have a character that you don't want to arc and you want her to change the world, she still is going to have some movement in her character, some claiming something. And so you need, there's so many reasons to have a character flaw. Number one is she's not going to feel real. She will feel like a construct because there's no human being on the planet without a flaw. Often what they need to learn is sitting in the flaw. So there won't be any movement in the character. There won't be any cracking or uncovering, so the second act will go just flatline. We won't emotionally relate to her because we're not perfect. And she'll become annoying pretty quickly because she won't feel real. And then why am I going to stay with her emotionally through the rest of the movie? And flaws are really often very positive qualities that have inverted and gone negative for whatever reason, because they didn't feel safe to have that positive quality, because nobody ever accepted it, because they can't accept themselves, whatever, so that the yin and yang of that is really important. And if you just lop off the dark side or the dark half of it, we will all know it's not real. And I also would say a flaw is one of the doors into a character's vulnerability. And the vulnerability of the character is how we emotionally attach to them and go on the journey. So if you don't have her vulnerable at any point, then we're watching her and we're not in the movie. And then I think you've not done it before you've even gotten out of the gate.
That's great. And then maybe you can talk a little bit more, elaborate on strengths. What happens if you don't have enough strengths in the character? Because I think that's a really good point, and very particularly for Australian screenwriters.
Well, I think, well, it's very easy to write a character who's just observing and reacting to everybody else. But the truth is, then you're asking, or a character who's being put upon and put upon and put upon and doesn't know what to do. And all the movement is kind of backwards. All the energy is back. That will last for a little while. You can get away with that for a little while, but very quickly we will tire of it because we are there to see, why is this person the hero of this story? Of all the people and all the stories you have that can tell in the world, why is this person the one that we all need to watch? Because they have this strength, or they have this aspect of character, or they have something, dogged determinism, whatever it is, that will pull them into the story in an active way. That is a strength. And so that feeling of, why are we watching this person? What is that piece of them that is special, that I admire? And I think if you don't have that, you end up asking the audience to commit to her character or his character through pity. And that is incredibly dangerous, because pity will not get you 3 acts. It's not a true attachment. It's I'm out of the movie and pitying you. Oh, that poor thing, that poor person. That's emotional, but it's pretty thin emotion versus true deep attachment. Psychologically, we've attached to the character because of their strength and their flaw and their vulnerability. That's harder work to get, of course, for your character, but that is the work that you should be doing.
I know that when you were looking for a flaw for your female protagonist in a recent project, you mentioned that you were like struggling to find a flaw that wasn't like the daddy flaw. Like, can you talk about the range of flaws, or particularly flaws for female characters, things to look out for?
Well, I mean, and it's with any character, but having daddy issues is a flaw that's often given to women, or those fake flaws. She's just too determined. That's not really a flaw. Like those when you go on an interview and they say, "What's your flaw?" and you kind of do an inverse one because it's not really a flaw. I would say having a daddy complex. I mean, the reason that's incredibly difficult is because the story ends up being about the father, not her, because it's his problem, and he's, you're trying to solve something that character is not her. So the whole thing starts to become an echo. I think it's incredibly valid to have a woman's what's at stake or what her goal is to be her family or her children, but I don't think that's the only thing we can give them. I think often, it's interesting to me, and just from an object film theory perspective, that when they made the first Aliens, that was my understanding is that role was written for a boy. They didn't even change his name. Ripley was a man. And it was one of the best female characters ever, because she was slightly selfish. She wants to get out of here, and, and she's just trying to save people. And she has very clear survival goals. And as soon as the next one comes and she's a woman, then the goal becomes save a kid. Right. And all those mother goals start coming up. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I love that movie. I love that movie with that little girl. I thought it was awesome. But just in terms of the breadth, can we widen that out? Can we widen out what her flaw can be? And can we widen out what she wants and what she's fighting for? What is she fighting for? And what does she want? So again, it's not to say one is bad or one is good. It's more about more possibility and more choice for your character.
And right now, do you think that, times are changing? Do you think that audiences in the marketplace want different types of female protagonists? Is there a new appetite, a different appetite? Any thoughts on that? Female protagonists now?
I think we want real ones. We want real, live women, psychological women with layers. But I don't know. I mean, if you think back to, Hepburn and there were some amazing female characters in the past, right? So I can't say that, I think it's not correct to say that we want something. We've had it. We have had it. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know how to answer that question because we've had it. We've had great characters.
And what about, have you got anything to say about the kinds of characteristics of a female protagonist that might attract a great actress? What actresses are likely to be looking at? And now, for instance, because, I had a recent experience and I realised, until you helped us, that we were like doing this sad old lady movie, and it occurred to me that was probably not a great, very tempting offer to a female actress. So do you have any thoughts on how you can, what that as an element for the writer to consider?
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely a great writing exercise to think who's your ideal casting, like your wish list casting. And if it's Cate Blanchett or Jodie Foster or whoever it is, to go watch their movies and see what did attract, and think about it. What did attract them to this role? What did this role have that actress, of the thousands and thousands of things she's offered, said, I need to do that? Yes, often it can be the director, but I promise you there was still something in the role that they thought they wanted to explore. And I do think that they want that range I'm talking about. They want to be able to put a mask in front and have the psychology behind, and that it lines up and have a skill, that's something they can learn, that this character can do, that this character's good at and this character's bad at. So I think all the stuff we talked about is all the stuff an actress wants, or any actor. But I think, again, it's also about variety, like letting them do something that they haven't done before. And that is something that people will tune into because it's so unique, or she feels like a true presence on the screen. But I think watching actresses' movies and thinking about that, why this part? What is so great about this part? What is the dynamic inside the character that they're playing with through the movie and changing? Why was that dynamic, that internal psychological dynamic, interesting to an actor to play? I think that's what everybody should be doing that for their scripts.
Have there been any recent female protagonists in either film or TV that you've really thought were amazing, just really blew you away?
I really had a great time in the Star Wars movie with her. I thought she was super fun. I thought it was, when she's yelling, stop holding my hand when they're running, you just can't do that in movies anymore because she just blew it out of the water, right? I mean, I loved being in the audience because I went on opening night with the place packed with Star Wars nerds who are mostly men. And when she puts out her hand and gets the lightsaber and it comes flying across, that place went crazy. And it did not matter that she was a girl. It had nothing to do with it. That's what I loved most of all. It wasn't because she was a girl that they were yelling. It was because she was a great character. And in that moment, the story turned on her. I think she's super fun. I just think and I'm so excited to see where she goes and who she is and how powerful she is. It's so exciting. I just thought they let her have fun. They just let her they let her doubt and wonder and run away. I don't like, for me personally, I think that they can rely on that too much for women. Like, how long can you not accept your role as the leader of the revolution? Like, okay, God, like, come on. But I thought she was super fun. And there's actors that I'll watch anything they do. Meryl Streep, name any character she's ever played. Love them all because she works so hard and is such an amazing talent at all those layers and the psychology. And, there's just certain things I go back to. But yeah, did I answer it?
You did very, very well. All right, I think you might have nearly answered all my questions. You've been so good. Because I had talked about passivity. I had on my list passivity, the daddy flaw, being a whiny loser, winning, engagement. Is there anything else that is a mistake that you see when you've been doing your consultation work? Any other mistakes that you see people commonly making writing female protagonists?
It just is this need for her to be, for her, how do I say this? It's just the need for her to be able to point the finger at somebody else. That's the point of the movie, right? Like, you wronged me, versus self-responsibility. You know, what we want to see is a character taking self-responsibility by the end of the movie. Who are you, and what did you do, and what were your choices? And to have that epiphany at the end of Act 2, that consciousness break about who they are and the choices they made that got them into this terrible situation. That's the deep character work that catharsis we're all waiting for. And you don't want any character, male or female, but to just be that kind of reactive, leaning back character, waiting for somebody else to take responsibility for them. It's not the purpose of a story, in my opinion. The purpose is action, to take action and go into conflict, right? And what do you want? What's interesting to me is, and I don't know if this is cultural or, but I don't think women are taught to be very clear and conscious of what they want in life. I think they're taught to support what other people want and help other people get what they want. And I can remember in my 20s when somebody said to me, yeah, but what do you want? And I was like, what? I just was like, what? And they're like, what do you want? So it's an internal process you have to go through yourself in order to let your character have that too, right? She's allowed to want something, even if it's the wrong thing for her. Yeah, probably it is, because that's her flaw and she's avoiding something, or she's got mixed up about what her value is, or for whatever reason, she wants it. And she's going to, do what it takes through Act 2 to get it, so that she can come to consciousness about what she wants and versus what she needs, and who she is, and her self-responsibility. That's all the good juice. And I just think some people just leave it. They don't access that enough. They're not fighting hard enough for their character. They're not letting her be the 3 dimensions that she could be.
And did I read that you went and you were an advisor at that special Meryl Streep lab for writers?
Yeah, I was an advisor at the Meryl Streep Writers Lab for women over 50. I think I've advised at writers labs before, and part of this lab was like every lab, where you're digging in and digging down into the story and who the writers are and why do you want to tell this story, and let's talk about craft. You're doing all of that work. I would say what was different about the lab was just these women have lived lives, and they have a lot. They know what they want to say. And they're not that worried about offending other people or supporting people. Like, I want to write a script and I've written it, and there's a beautiful purity to it at that point, which I really admired in all of the women and all the mentors.
And I guess, and for you, I guess this is my last question, unless you've got anything else you want to add, but you're doing some amazing projects at the moment, really hit, you've always been a great writer, but you're really in a strong place. Do you feel that you are drawing on your femaleness as a writer as part of your well? Is there anything you can say about the strengths of being a female writer?
I don't know how to talk about the strength of being a female writer, because I've never been a male writer. I think, yeah, sure. I like being in the room when a story is being discussed and I can raise my hand about a female character and say, well, let's think about this. And can't she be more than that? And, is that all the only reaction she would have? Like, I like being that little poker. But as a writer, I'm excited to tell the female perspective in terms of how we experience life. But really, it's for me, it's always the same. Male or female, what's the best story? Male or female, what's the best character? And I like to just think about that. Because if I worry too much about having to represent all women, I don't think you can get a good character that way. Because no one person can represent all women, just like no one man can represent all men. So It's about getting really specific about this woman. So I don't know yet. If I'll let you know as I go if I find that I have a special added skill as a woman writer. Let me look at my notes. Let me look. Because of course I had to write notes. La la la. What is there? No, I think we talked about it all. We talked about it all. You're welcome. Isn't it great? I know. I'm a nominated for Academy Award. I'm like, yeah, but you know what I'm really proud of? This group called Book. I'm so proud that it's in the world, that it just birthed out there. I know.